I was adopted when I was 14 months old, and I was adopted into a very dysfunctional home. My adoptive grandfather was a diagnosed sexual psychopath pedophile, and my adoptive father and his twin brother, they ran a child trafficking ring. And so I was trafficked from age 2 into my 20s. So I went through a lot of extreme, horrific situations and lived in that criminal underworld and saw a lot of things that a lot of people wouldn't believe. And it left me with very extreme after effects that I've been working through for many, many years. And well, the NDEs happening before age 10. And one of them was through near drowning. And one of them was from a drug overreaction. And it was at the hands of the abusers. And at that point is when I felt a tug. It was like I was being pulled. And I didn't have a body anymore, but it kind of felt like the chest area. And it was this real pull. And things started to move very fast. And I was pulled along and still curious, right? And then the light came and I was pulled toward this light. There was a being there, 2 beings of light, and they didn't have form like a person. They were, it was hard to describe with words. They were just vibration and energy and colors that kept undulating. But the main thing was that it was pure unconditional love that they were made of and that was receiving my essence. And so these 2 beings of light were they were just helping me to remember what I had signed up for. And the biggest takeaway that stuck with me was the unconditional love and the no judgment. And that was totally opposite of what I'd learned so far on earth, going to church. And, it was all about a judgmental God and being sent to hell if you're bad and all that stuff. And so that was not the case. So I saw a lot on the journey with these 2 light beings. And so when like them showing me that I had agreed to this, that when I remembered that, it was like, oh yes. And the challenge was for me to remember who we all are. And because I had other lifetimes where I had died in a rage and feeling betrayed and angry and didn't remember who I was or who others were. I was stuck in that egoic kind of judgment stuff. So I guess you get as many chances as you like, right? I remembered like bit of it. I remembered the light beings. I remembered the love. I remembered some of what happened, but it came back over time as I needed it because I was still in this horrific situation with abuse and it just buried everything. And so over time, it revealed itself more and more. And as I was able to process it and assimilate it, and then it helped me through my healing journey. So it was like everything was unfolding beautifully, like just perfectly. But of course, at the time, I didn't think that. I didn't know that. I thought I was like, this is unfair. How could I be going through this? No, I'm completely unloved on this planet. God hates me. Like the universe hates me. Like that's sort of how I felt. I felt completely and utterly abandoned in my life. And was just hanging on by my fingernails trying to survive. And then ultimately I had another NDE that was with a drug reaction. I was given too much of a drug. And again, my breathing stopped. And it was a very similar thing, going through trying to be revived, and it wasn't working. And I saw the same light beings again. So it was like they were guides and they were friends. I remembered them. It was like we had this connection, but they were teachers. They were more experienced than me. And so they met me again. And it was the same thing. It was that same love, the same pure unconditional love, the pure awareness, the return to self and the return to source. And the return to source. And the return to source. And it wasn't quite as in depth as the first one. It was shorter, it felt, but it was another reminder of who I really am and where I come from and what's surrounding me and what's surrounding all of us. And again, it was that reiteration that there was no judgment. And that there is no hell. There is no punishment. There's not some external God that keeps score and sends people to be punished. It doesn't work that way that I saw. Yeah, it was just how some of the people who had been abusing me so horrifically, what had happened to them and how far back this went generationally. And it was almost like this curse that had to be broken, right? And so they didn't come here and start off and darkened. Things happened. It's not random. And they lost sight of who they are. They forgot who they are. They were stuck in fear and rage and disconnection. And in the NDEs, I had seen that is what evil is. That's where evil comes from. It's funny, evil's lived backwards, right? So it's kind of like living backwards. Evil behavior comes from disconnection and lack and fear and rage and hurt and all these things that we can become cloaked with. That was part of the healing journey. And I was gradually able to, this has been many decades of, work, inner work and remembering and wrestling with the egoic layers and wrestling with feelings of betrayal and outrage and unfairness and victimhood. And I got quite quite identified with the victim mindset and the trauma. So when we're embodied and we develop an ego, and it's a defense mechanism to get through the world, and we learn to not show certain parts of ourselves and to suppress certain parts of ourselves. And we have defense mechanisms and triggers and all these funny patterns and egoic patterns. And we identify with these as this is who I am, right? And it's utterly believed 100%. So you cannot possibly conceive that I would choose anything horrible. Why would you do that? That's so stupid. That, it makes no sense. And when I was in the first part of the NDE, when I was still kind of carrying some of that, I was like, why would I do that? That's really dumb. to these light beings, and they kind of, if they were to chuckle at me, like patting a child on the head, oh, you're so cute, that's what they kind of did.